supernatural is something that isn't supposed to happen, but it does happen.
And no nation which expects to be the leader of other nations can expect to stay behind in this race for space.
What does it take to convince you that the dead do not always rest in peace?
So once again, that's our brand new, video that we just had made for us. So, but at this time, we are going to be talking about how the pyramids were actually constructed. So not some of these, crazy ones where we just had some guy throw a block on his back and walk up a ramp, and stick them together like Legos. That's Steve Myers. How are you, sir? Thanks for coming on the show.
I'm very good. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm honored.
Oh, well, hey, it's amazing that you would be honored to be on our show. I mean, hey, we take that as like, yeah, that's just awesome to us. But yeah, so there's the lost technology of the Great Pyramid, how the Great Pyramid was built. Looking into this, I have to say your theory was one that I really wasn't familiar with prior to this, and I don't want to steal any thunder. I want to let you get into this for anybody that hasn't, because most people, they've all heard the stories of Moses and the slaves and everybody's, you've seen the movie, with Charlton Heston, whips are out there and everybody's with ropes and they're lugging these blocks. And your book says that didn't happen.
Not with the Great Pyramid, no. I mean, that's a good story. And it's a wonderful story to come up with strong back knuckle draggers that drug 70-ton payloads up a dirt ramp that would have had to have been larger than the Great Pyramid itself. I mean, that's a story, but that is also called a hypothesis, and you can lend credence to that hypothesis with a demonstration. And that story is propagated by Egyptologists, but Egyptology doesn't engage in the scientific method and provide a demonstration to validate their story. They've never moved a 70-ton payload 1 inch. They've never made precision stone cutting in the manner they say it was done, and a whole host of other things they've never done. So they're just storytellers. But there are other explanations of the same direct physical evidence that the Great Pyramid provides.
And for everybody that wants to look, you can go to Amazon right now and you can have this sent to you right now so you can read along as we talk about it with the Kindle version. So you can get those, or you can have the book sent to you through there, or you can go to his site right here, thepump.org, and this talks about the research that he's done, a little bit more details on there, so you can go check out both of those sites. We really encourage people to go out there, buy the books, and go along with this, because this one, like you said, the thing that's always been the craziest part for me too is when everybody talks about the construction. Is I'm of the belief that the Egyptians that we see that they're talking about, I think that they were doing something that was already there. I don't know myself if I personally believe that they constructed the physical Great Pyramid, the Sphinx, that these were a prior civilization that was there, and they just kind of worked with what there was there, like a blank they would be a blank canvas.
Oh yes, a lot of people contend that. A lot of alternative researchers, it's like a what they call a hermit crab that'll go find a shell that it can fit into, and go into that shell. And it's a lot of people think the Egyptologists' explanation of ancient Egypt is sort of like that a lot of those magnificent, out of place artifacts like the Great Pyramid were probably built by a pre-existing civilization than the agrarian civilization described by Egyptologists. So I agree with that. I agree with that fully. That's a definite possibility because Egyptology can't show how even components of the Great Pyramid were made or moved with the technology they seem to have.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's because we were talking a little bit, earlier today, with us, and it's about the stone. It's like if it was back when they say it was, we should be able to tell how they perfectly cut these blocks that they are seamlessly stacked together. And this, I'm sorry, when you're going back there and you see all the images of these tools and stuff, you're not hammering, chiseling these giant 70-ton blocks into perfect squares that lock into place. And not only that, moving these stones, like I said, with ropes and, as the guy taskmaster's whipping and moving those and putting them in place. And that's where your theory, and if you want to get into that, I mean, this is like perfect segue. I actually really like your theory on, because this makes sense, because I liken it to the Panama Canal.
Well, I appreciate that. A 70-ton payload is the weight of a locomotive engine. And all Egyptology has to do is take the wheels off a locomotive engine, on a train, take the wheels off the engine and drag it up a dirt road. And all of us alternative researchers will go away because they have demonstrated, in effect, their ideas. But they won't do that. They won't engage in the scientific method for two reasons. One reason is because they're wrong. And the second reason is because their explanation is an impossibility. Just like nobody demonstrates that cows jump over the moon, even though you can read about it and everything else. There's no demonstration of that. So nobody believes it. But for some reason, Egyptology can get away with that. But that science is in crisis. But yes, the real people in the real world wanted to move things that weighed thousands of tons, like a battleship. And they really had to do it. They had to actually do it in the real world. So they built the Panama Canal. My dad was on the West Virginia battleship during World War II. That battleship could be lifted and moved in the Panama Canal. And we think that water locks were an integral aspect of moving stones from the Nile River all the way up to the building site, and that the stones were moved effortlessly. The stones are beyond the scale of human back muscles to move in any type of efficient manner. It can't be done. So they used water locks and efficiently and quickly moved stones all the way up to the building site. So it's a fascinating technology.
Yeah, because that's just the thing. Is when you look at it, because just the amount, whether they want to say it was, pulley systems, levers, they had they had these crane type things. I mean, you start looking at these things, once again, you're not answering the question of how did a guy with a simple Bronze Age type tool carve a 70-ton block of stone, not only just carve it out of the face, then they supposedly traveled that great distance for them to then lift it up and stack it. I'm like, the logistics of this is insane. I go, I don't know how they would do it. And then when you came along with your theory, which I really liked, well, now we just have to explain. Now we just have to figure out, one, how did they carve it? And how did they get it into whatever they used, whether it was the type of barge type thing, to then float it to where it needed to go and then shift it over?
Right. There are some hieroglyphs or pictographs in the Valley of the Nile showing large obelisks being moved on barges. And all researchers acknowledge that barges were used because some of the quarries are across the river from the Great Pyramid, and some are even 400 miles upstream. But in terms of cutting the stone, my understanding is greater than the entire understanding of Egyptology in terms of cutting the stone. And what my understanding is that it can't be done using hand tools, no matter how many books they put out that show drawings of people with the chisels and hammers or the Doriite pounders. It can't be done. I'm chiseling, precision. So they're highly precise, and it can't be done. So it's just another falsehood that they perpetrate, and that's why that science is in crisis.
Now, as you were just saying that, a thing popped in my head. I apologize, I can't remember the guy's name, but it was his theory that the Sphinx actually went under water erosion.
Yes.
So would that
Robert Schoch?
Yeah. So would that
a brilliant? I've met him and everything, of course, but he's brilliant geologist. And the Sphinx is made out of rock, so it's in his wheelhouse to examine it, and the Sphinx enclosure. And his assessment is that it was built much earlier than Egyptologists say it was built. They say it was built about 4,500 years ago, but based on water erosion and some other factors, he says it's probably pre-last ice age, so it's about 12,000 years ago. And
Wow.
and I see no problem with that at all. So they Egyptologists say that the Sphinx and the pyramids were built within a generation of one another, but with the Sphinx being built so much earlier, that kind of pulls back the construction date of the pyramid. So it's interesting.
Yeah, and now just kind of the one where I was thinking is just, so with this lock system, like in a way that you're talking about, could some of that water runoff be potentially part of what was some of this water erosion that the Sphinx suffered? Because you'd have this massive quantity of water going through this system, and if you had runoff, you could have this sandstone is going to be susceptible to running water.
Yeah, limestone actually, but
limestone. Yeah, sorry.
Yes, you are correct. That is a variable that kind of can be a factor for the age of the Sphinx and the water erosion. The Sphinx is lower in elevation than the Great Pyramid, and from the water runoff from the Great Pyramid, that could have been a factor. But that's just a fine point, if you will. But it does add a variable to the age of the Sphinx and the other structures on the Giza Plateau. But yeah, they used barges and moved stones effortlessly. In the 1830s, the Erie Canal was built here in the United States. It was 4.5 feet deep when built, but it had a capacity of moving barges that had 70-ton payloads, like corn or lumber or coal.
Same thing.
But that's interesting.
Now, yeah. So that now, what's there? It's pouring rain outside. I don't know if anybody could hear that over the thing. All of a sudden, it just started dumping outside the window there. It's, when they would float, like your theory, when they'd get the blocks in place, how were they at that point? I'm just picturing like they're getting up to the top. I mean, how are they shifting it? Because that's been one of the things.
We have a video series that they can watch for free on our website at thepump.org, and it describes the entire process of moving stones. We think that it's right at the top, one of the top things. They can also download a ISO file and make their own DVD, if you will, if people are smart enough to do that. I'm not. But they use specialized barges to both move and set in place these stones. So imagine, if you will, that they have this pond on the Great Pyramid was built level by level, including casing stones. And there was a pond on top of the level being constructed, and it was impounded by the casing stones. So that pond is only about 4.5 feet deep. People could wade in it. But imagine, if you will, two supports that are separated about the width of one of the barges. And the stones on a barge would overhang the barge just a little bit. So when the barge with a stone went between these two supports, they allowed water to enter the barge. So it would lower in the water, and then they would rest, the stone on the barge would rest on those two supports. Then they could move the partially submerged barge out of the way, move it to the side of the pond, and then siphon the water out of it, and then it would raise back up. So
Wow.
So they could unload a stone off of a barge faster than you could explain how it was done.
So in theory, what do you think happened to these barges? Why they're not in a museum, or where did the barges go? If this was the theory on how they were used.
Well, we're talking a long time ago, and history, the study of anything in history, is a jigsaw puzzle with some pieces missing. But those barges were up on this pond, and I think that they were moved over to the side and then lowered down to a canal that was right around the Great Pyramid, and that's described in the video series. But there are no barges as evidence that exist that were used for the Great Pyramid's construction. But all researchers acknowledge that they used barges because the quarries, again, were across the river and upstream 400 miles. So the barges were used, but none remain. It's like they made Fabergé eggs just a little over than 100 years ago, but where are the machines that they used to make them?
Wow,
Nobody knows. They were later, lathes and other things were later used to make watches or weapon wars or whatever, but who knows where those machines are. But the point is, Fabergé eggs were still made to extreme precision, but where's the machines?
April commented, and she was just like, my mind is like blown. I'm like, yeah, I know. You get these things because you're so used to just growing up. The pyramids were built by Egyptians using slaves, and that was the thing. And then you look at these things and like your theory, and I wish I could attribute who said it. I want to say I was talking with my wife about this too, but it was just that the theory is that not only were these not slaves, these were fellow Egyptians that were paid very well and were well fed and taken care of. This was like an actual work crew that when they were in the off season, weren't growing crops, they'd come in and they would be working here. So you wouldn't have this slave labor thing. Was actually most likely not even a thing when they were building these pyramids.
Well, the status of the workers is certainly under scholarly debate. I mean, I've worked for wages, and oftentimes that's called a wage slave, if you will. But the people that worked on, let's say, the Hoover Dam, they made 50 cents an hour, but they were highly trained workers. And in the early 30s, 50 cents an hour, all the workers went and bought homes and all of that. So they were highly paid. People came from all over the United States to work on that project because it was like prosperity. It was so.
Oh, yeah.
So what makes a person a slave is up to scholarly debate. But I'm sure that just like people that worked on submarines in World War II, they were paid pretty well and they were fed very well. And factory workers, if here in the 21st century, if you're a factory worker, you're probably overweight because the work you do, a lot of it is done by the machines and the apparatus. So I think that they had a good life. There were guys working on barges, repairing them, and there were guys operating water locks. They were just opening and closing the doors. So yeah, it was a good life working on the Great Pyramid.
You just picture that, you got some heavy guy just like, yeah, fine, I'll open the door.
Yeah.
I'm calling my union. I'm calling my union rep.
Yeah. Right. So it's hard to say what their citizenship status was, but to me, what they did, since I'm kind of technically oriented, what they did was much more important than their citizenship status. But I'm sure it was good. It was an important project that whoever funded it made sure the workers ate well and had a good life.
Yeah, and because we teased it, the thing where I said, you got 10 Commandments, Charlton Heston's movie, you're seeing all these people. It's that was one of the things, like I've said it a couple times now, where I really like your theory is, that is such an inefficient way would be to construct something anyway. It's like you're constantly killing your workforce.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, the horse isn't pulling enough. You didn't get the field done today. Pow. You're like, what did you do? You just killed your horse because it didn't plow the field today. Well, yeah, it's not an efficient horse. I'm like, well, yeah, it's really not efficient now. You don't have it.
Yeah, everything about the construction of the Great Pyramid was efficient, and it was a production line efficiency and easy on the back muscles. I mean, the guys that operate the Panama Canal that you mentioned, those guys that operate it, they press buttons and move levers. They don't lift battleships.
Yeah, so those dog trains just pull them. Yeah.
Using water locks is actually one of the only systems that has been demonstrated to work, thousands, millions of times. But the big ramp or using a magic wand or that type of stuff, or worshiping crystals, or, contemplating your navel, none of those systems have really worked to demonstrate how heavy payloads were moved.
Yeah, because I've heard some theories like they use sound waves, they use these things to levitate. They because I think the theory, probably like the levitation one, the only one where I kind of give some credence to that theory in some way is we have down here close to us the Coral Castle, and that's in here you have a single individual that supposedly has moved all these blocks by himself in these locations, and it's the same thing. You don't know how he did it, and as a single person, you're like, there's no way you move these blocks.
Yeah, I actually haven't been there yet. I'd like to, but it is a modern day mystery, to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote some cryptic books, and also. There's some mystery about what he did, although he moved his whole castle from one location to another, but he used trucks that had diesel motors to go from one location to another. So that's
another.
Yeah, I'm not trying to discredit anything.
Oh no, it's one of those things. Yeah, and that's the one where that's the only example I can think, like modern time, where I could say, this is close to where, okay, I could give this one an audience, but like you said, you're looking at these things, like your example is the best. You take the wheels off a locomotive and now you're going to drag that up a hill.
Yeah.
It's like, please, let's see it happen. Because if you can do it, then.
Yeah. The scientific method is really, really valuable because you can, set aside ideas that aren't workable. I mean, that's why it has so much value. And but I know a lot of researchers that say, well, everything's possible, or we can't really discount anything. Well, then if your research method doesn't help you, get rid of the chaff, if you will, then you're not getting anywhere. And that's what is the value of the scientific method. That's why all sciences, except for Egyptology, use the scientific method when they can. So,
what would you say is their biggest, because you always see this thing, and I always ask this question of several people, why are they so hesitant to actually follow the facts? It's like they've got this dogma, they've got this thing where it's like, It doesn't matter. You could dig up a hole and show something that is completely opposite of what their theory is, and they're like, no.
No,
Well,
not at all.
well, not to dwell on Egyptology, but it is the only science that has stagnated. Books written by Egyptologists 100 years ago are virtually the same as they are now. And I created a YouTube video that asks the question, is Egyptology a pseudoscience? And it certainly meets a lot of criteria. No demonstrations, being intractable in their ideas. They don't work with others. They don't work with stonemasons. They certainly don't work with Robert Schoch. He was eviscerated by Egyptology for his assessment of the age of the Sphinx and all of that. So yeah, you go to my YouTube channel to watch that video, and it's people say it's compelling. But yeah, Egyptology is in crisis, and will certainly it's going to either change quite a bit or go the way of phrenology. Not too long ago, they taught that the bumps on people's heads correlated with character traits or that type of thing, but that couldn't withstand the rigors of the scientific method, and it went away. So it's Egyptology is in crisis right now, and we'll see as time goes by. The Piltdown skull was discovered, and all the anthropologists wrote their doctoral thesis on the Piltdown skull, but it wasn't until 40 years later that the Piltdown skull was deemed a hoax with the file marks on it and all of that. Well, what happened was all the anthropologists that wrote their doctoral thesis, none of those people changed their minds. They just died off. And the next generation of anthropologists never did think the Piltdown skull was valid, but nobody changed their mind. So right now, what we're doing is we're waiting for Egyptologists, this generation, to die off. And that's how science advances, funeral by funeral.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I just saw Amber. I don't know if you saw it on the screen there. She put Occam's razor, and I think that's exactly what this is. It's just, you have hit it on. It's like, instead of trying to do the History Channel, aliens have come down. These were spaceports that they built so that the alien ships could come on here. You've come up with something that is in fact that this is something that could physically happen. People can do it. I mean, like you said, we've talked about that. We've talked about the Panama Canal. You can watch it right now on videos. You can watch this happen. These massive container ships just go up, and they can float to the next one, and they go up, and all it is simple water feed. I mean, who hasn't been to an attraction? People have been to Disneyland, I think, has it. There's a giant, I think it's granite. It's this giant ball that's sitting in water.
Yeah, in Tomorrowland. I've seen that in there.
Yeah, and so kids go up there all the time, and you're pushing it, and you're like, that's Stevens Point right there. Mm-hmm. You have this giant block of stone sitting in water, and you have this little 3-year-old kid with his dad sitting there shoving it, and they're starting to make this thing move, and you're like, I mean, what more do you need?
It really is. The Panama Canal was recently, like within the last 10 years, expanded with bigger water locks. Mm-hmm. And so what that means is, to move our heaviest objects, water locks are the 21st century system of choice. We didn't use big cables or anything like that. We use water locks in the real world. Well, in the real world in ancient times, they used water locks to move their heaviest objects to build the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, I mean, I could see that now, and that makes sense how you can have such a vast quantity of these large objects, the obelisks, these blocks, moved in such what would be, in history-wise, such a relatively short amount of time.
Yes, the Erie Canal was able to move the weight of the Great Pyramid about 6,000 tons, or 6 million, whatever. I don't know now. I'm exhausted, but I think it was 6 million tons. It moved that weight in a period of 2 years, and it also lifted it higher than the height of the Great Pyramid. One end of the Erie Canal is higher than the Great Pyramid compared to the other end, if you get what I'm trying to say. So yeah, it's fast. Water locks are fast. That's why they put them in. That's why they built the Erie Canal, because it was so fast and a fantastic method.
And you got it right. 6.5 million tons.
Yeah.
You got it right. Yeah.
Thank you.
6.5 million. Yep.
Yeah. But the Erie Canal moved that in 2 years. So I think the Great Pyramid was built quite quickly than most people think.
That's
Yeah.
amazing.
This is just always, I don't know, since growing up. I mean, who hasn't had a fascination with ancient Egypt? It's just, you got the pyramids, you've got this weird looking half human, half lion thing that's, sticks out in the ground, and just, you look at, I mean, it's not really the basis of your book so much, but I mean, what are you under the impression that the actual purpose of the Great Pyramid and stuff served? Because obviously there's all these different theories.
Well, there's a lot of different theories. Some people say it was built to unify Egypt, and all of that. And we could unify the United States by building a $50 billion pile of rocks. But the reason why we don't do that is because it would be stupid. Okay.
Go back to the Conservation Corps.
Yeah, it wouldn't work. The Great Pyramid was a beacon for aliens. See, aliens could come all the way to the Earth from Orion, but they had to pile rocks on top of each other to find their way back home. So that's one idea. And that it was a tomb for a pharaoh, even though it doesn't look like a tomb. It has a whole bunch of passages and chambers, but it doesn't matter because Egyptologists are tomb robbers. And if you come encounter this great big pyramid building, they say, oh, well, it must have been a tomb, but they stole all the stuff out of it before we could steal it.
Yeah.
Egyptologists' explanation of the Great Pyramid. So,
Wow.
But I think, and I'm going to show you what I think that the Great Pyramid was for. You see this right here?
Oh, here we go.
That's my belly. Okay. My belly. And there's a correlation between the Great Pyramid and the people who built it, their bellies. Okay. What they wanted to do is they wanted to eat every day. And the Great Pyramid helped them do that. They also didn't want to work 12 hours a day. They wanted to have some leisure time. But the Great Pyramid, this big structure that they built at a huge cost, gave them leisure. And they also wanted prosperity. They didn't want poverty. But somehow the Great Pyramid transformed poverty into prosperity. Isn't that exciting? Anybody like prosperity?
Oh yeah, everybody does.
Everybody likes prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
Here in the United States, we're inundated by it, but not so much in the third world or other countries. But we love prosperity. So they also wanted to turn the desert into a garden. So they did that by building the Great Pyramid, and it did all of those things because it was a machine that actually did something. It was infrastructure for the civilization that built it. They weren't trying to tell us they knew pi or anything like that, or that it pointed to a star. They weren't trying to do that. That's falsehoods. But they use this infrastructure as we use infrastructure to improve the lives of the people that built it and their children. And it did all of that by the Great Pyramid was a water pump.
And that's because I was gonna, you beat me to it. I was like I said, because that was the thing. It was because it was one of the greatest things is because anybody that's, if everybody's following along, okay, we got water lock system. Now, as you're going up, somehow the water has got to get up to the top.
Yes.
And flow down. So there has to be something to pump. So we've either got the thousands of people up there. All right, ready? Go now. And they're just back and forth. And you're, in this giant pump, or this is where you're
a water pump. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The water used in water locks weighs a lot more than the payload that you move on barges. So if they had to manually move the water, it would sure take the fun out of life with a
Oh,
big
yeah.
brigade. But the Great Pyramid is built with some rather unique features. It has a descending passage that goes down 100 feet below the Great Pyramid to the subterranean chamber. And all of that was built first before the Great Pyramid was assembled. And water that existed at the base of the Great Pyramid went through that subterranean chamber, and with some check valves and other features that had been destroyed through the eons, that subterranean chamber and the associated cuttings acted like a water pump. And a similar type of water pump in modern times is a hydraulic ram water pump, but it worked a little differently, if you will, I think more efficiently. And that pumped water up to supply water for the water locks. That was like a beating heart deep below the Great Pyramid that supplied the lifeblood for the water locks to make the assembly of the Great Pyramid possible.
Yeah, because that's one of the coolest things. Here's I'm going to bring this up here so people can see, kind of just get an idea. It's like what he was talking about, the hydraulic ram pump. So here. So if anybody has seen like the picture that, you see the pyramid, if anybody thinks about the Great Pyramid, here's that what they call the central chamber. And here's that, like you said, you can start seeing some of the similarities between the two.
There are some similarities and some differences, but that helps people get an idea of where we're coming from. They say, well, where's the big, where's the big, diesel engine or to run it? No, these pumps work, without electricity or diesel engines, but it worked in a very similar fashion. That's what modern man has come up with, is these hydraulic ram water pumps. But the builders of the Great Pyramid had a very similar method to keep those water locks full and move stones effortlessly. So it's quite ingenious, the whole thing. It's an integrated system of both the construction of the Great Pyramid and its ultimate use. It was a big construction project, but it had a huge return on investment.
When it's kind of like you said, where modern technologies, they're using the same exact thing. Look, we talked about the Panama Canal a couple times. That is based on rainfall. They have they know how much rainfall is going to get, so that way that lake is what, the name's failing me right now, but the lake is what feeds these locks, and they have it set so the whole system is entwined to where there's just enough rainfall to keep these locks going.
Right. And I'm a big fan of the Panama Canal. These new water locks have at the Panama Canal have what they call side ponds, that they're able to reuse some of the water in the same water lock. And
nice.
Those new bigger water locks use less water than the smaller water locks. So it is very ingenious. And they also generate their own electricity for the Panama Canal system, and the whole works. And it's a marvelous achievement here it was in the 20th century, one of the wonders of the world for the 20th century. So one of my goals in life is to go through the Panama Canal. I haven't done that yet. So hopefully
it's fun. We got to do it on a cruise once, and it was, I'm just not quite tall enough. I almost touched the wall, even though they repeatedly told you do not do it. And I'm reaching. I'm an idiot. I'm just reaching out there. I'm like, come on, I can do it. I can do it. Yeah. Like, my wife's over there. Stop it. I'm like, but I want to be able to say I touched the wall. You're like, yeah, so you can get kicked off the ship. I'm like,
he normally doesn't break rules, so I'm surprised he even tried to reach out and touch it.
Yeah, that's
very, very important infrastructure, the Panama Canal. And, we didn't do it because the canals point to stars or anything. We did it to make shipping so much cheaper. And, it helps. It's a wonderful thing. Just like hydroelectric dams, they all have passages that point to stars. But that's not the intent of hydroelectric dams. Those dams are for infrastructure that provide prosperity. All the hydroelectric dam does is make electrons go through a wire, but that is used in a multitude of ways. Just like the Great Pyramid water pump, all it did was pump water, but that pumped water was used in a host of different purposes. They generated electricity. They powered heavy machinery. They probably made compressed air, which was used for a whole host of industrial purposes and irrigation. So the Giza Plateau was more of a science center or industrial park than just like a graveyard.
Yeah, that's I don't know. It's one of those, and we keep rolling back, cycling back to the same thing. It's just, and I keep saying, just with your book, that's the part I like. It's just, it makes sense when this thing, because it's the easiest explanation, because it doesn't require this technological feat that everybody's like, okay, well, it was lost. Well, the only thing that we really, for me, that's probably still the dilemma is, how did they perfectly carve these blocks?
Yeah. But the first book that I written about the Great Pyramid is Lost Technologies of the Great Pyramid. And the technology to cut stone is lost. And one way to know that it's lost is no one can demonstrate it using any method that the original builders probably had, especially with the chisels and the hammers. Egyptology could get all of us alternative researchers to shut our mouths if they could just make a casing stone like those that covered the Great Pyramid. Just make one of them. And but they refuse to engage in the scientific method, and that has led to a lot of falsehoods regarding the Great Pyramid. So I'm the first one to say I don't know how the stones were cut, but I'm also the first one to say that every Egyptologist is wrong when they say it was done using hand tools.
Since they used the canal or whatever, the water, the water gate, do you think it could have been cut by water? I mean, this new technology that we have where we cut stuff with water, maybe it's not so new. We can't find the barges. Maybe they could have cut it with water. Water cuts precisely. So do you think that could be a possible theory on how they cut it?
I actually do. I do. I think that could be a very definite possibility. That they use like a water jet, if you will. There's some sonic methods to cut stone that Christopher Dunn talks about. Much of that, though, is to cut holes as opposed to flat surfaces that are 5 feet by 7 feet, but they're within 1/50th of an inch in precision, which is less than your thumbnail. So but I also know that Egyptology, all Egyptologists are wrong about about if they can't even get one casing stone right, what else are they wrong about? And I think a whole host of things, including the sequence of pyramid construction, certainly the purpose of the Great Pyramid, and a whole host of other things. So it's a strange world. They used to teach phrenology in college, but towards the end of that process, people were saying, "Hey, I don't believe in that," even though they teach it in college. Well, that's where we're at with Egyptology. Is a lot of people don't believe what they say anymore.
It was like the stone cutting. I link it up there with some of the really lost arts. Like one of the ones is the medieval, just the Dark Ages, the leaded glass. They don't know how to recreate that leaded glass that's in some of these churches. So if those windows are ever destroyed, it's that is a lost thing that cannot be replaced because nobody knows how to do it.
Yeah,
they lost that secret. They can't figure out.
Yeah. Well, and there were no primitive cultures. All ancient cultures had some very high technology. Ancient Egypt had birth control. They had C-sections. They had the Baghdad battery. They had lights that a lot of people think some of those tunnels didn't have any soot way down deep, but they were painted. And some people say they had some method to light the tunnels. South America, they had a lot of our medicines are derived from plants from South America. Aspirin is one, and others. They did lots of brain surgery in South America. Terrapanning, where you can still see the holes in the skulls, and that they have survived the brain surgery because it started to remodel. And so there are no primitive civilizations, and the only thing primitive is Egyptology's understanding of how the Great Pyramid was built.
Well, I saw that documentary, The Mummy. I mean, it showed used mirrors. That's how you see down those tunnels.
Yeah, I hear you. They when you say showed it, it was probably either a computer generated animation.
Oh yeah, it was the movie The Mummy. That's why I always shakes his head.
Yeah.
I always refer to that as the documentary that, it's like in the documentary The Matrix. Yeah, the documentary The Mummy. All you had to do was just simply move this mirror and it illuminated the entire area, and you're like, "Ooh, I can see."
Yeah. In real world, that's not viable. So. But the Great Pyramid was built in the real world, and they built it to actually have a huge return on investment, like a hydroelectric dam or a electrical power grid or a highway system, and huge return on investment for all of those things. The largest
agriculture and everything. Yeah,
the largest structure in the Valley of the Nile is not the Great Pyramid; it's the Aswan Dam. And that Aswan Dam was a huge expense, but it had a huge, and still does, return on investment with the generation of electricity. A lot of that electricity is used to power their extensive irrigation system. So instead of relying on the yearly inundation, the people spent all this money so they can increase the irrigated farmland and irrigate it year round instead of once a year. So Egypt has always needed massive water pumping systems in modern times and in ancient times.
Yeah, and that wouldn't make sense, because even if you go with the Bible, where it talks about Joseph working with the Pharaoh to make the grain storage, it makes sense. Like if this was still there, they would still be using it. So this would be an amazing agricultural boom, because now you have this water pump pumping water that you could easily irrigate this area that, like I said, you couldn't do a bucket brigade, couldn't do something like it. It would this would be flowing for agriculture, which would be an amazing thing.
That's true. That's why we use machines. The windmills up there in Holland and all of that. A lot of those windmills are 5 horsepower, the horsepower of a human, and that's all the power they put out. 5 horsepower is what a lawnmower puts out. It's 5 horsepower, but they built these great big windmills, years ago, 5 horsepower, but one man can put out about 1/10 of a horsepower working. Okay. So 5 horsepower is 50 men. So each windmill can do the work of 50 men without paying them, feeding them, housing them. So those windmills were an amazing improvement. So that's why we use machines, and for the advantage that they provide. And the Great Pyramid is a machine that if they just used it for irrigation, although there were other uses, it would have made Egypt the breadbasket of the world, which it was. And food, if you're the leader of a country and you have excess food, you have wealth that can be traded or whatever, instead of the next door nation that's having some sort of poverty or famine. And that's why they went from Israel, according to the Bible, over to Egypt, is because there was a famine in the land, and they went over to Egypt to get some food so all the Jews wouldn't die off, starve to death. So it's all interesting. It all kind of ties in and everything like that. But it's
No,
fun
it's like
to contemplate all of this stuff.
Oh yeah, like one of the things I'm really interested in too. April was commented, she said, "How did they do C-sections back there? Without killing it." I'm like, I'm actually really interested in that now too. Where that's something like I want to look into and see, because that is fascinating how they could do those procedures.
Oh yeah, look it up. They did a whole host of things that was amazing. All ancient civilizations. When you nap a arrowhead out of obsidian, the arrowhead is sharper than a scalpel used by a surgeon. In fact, surgery now often uses napped obsidian for their scalpels. So is that a 21st century technology, or did ancient man have knives sharper than any of the knives in our pockets? And so it's an amazing world. I was just at Yellowstone this summer, and they had a quarry that had some high quality obsidian that they have determined was quarried for centuries, and they traded that obsidian all the way to the Great Lakes and all over the place. So it's the American Indians, they weren't just digging roots or whatever. It's a whole commerce and high civilization. And
the development of papyrus and everything. I mean, it's just they changed a lot of things, and that's. But you kind of hit on it through your book, and it's kind of a recurring theme now that with some of the guests that we've had, and I really like this is just how we're showing that you don't have this modern thing that people have they kind of discovered that there was most likely pre-civilizations. This wasn't some alien ship that flew along and just dropped down and here, let me show you how to do this. This was a civilization that left behind some information, and then you have other people that have discovered that, and they were able to build, use that and build upon it and create some of these things, which are amazing because, like we said, this in the beginning, this looks like this is something that they continued on, that they may not have actually been the ones that originally were the ones that created this.
Right. The Pharaohic dynasty, Egypt, that Egyptologists study, the pyramids may have pre-existed that civilization, and I'm very open to that. But it doesn't. I hate to put it this way: it doesn't take a lot to develop some highly sophisticated technology. The guy that figured out penicillin, he saw bread mold. There was this penicillin on bread mold, and it was penicillin. But he figured it out pretty much in one day. We looked at it and kind of determined what it was, and we benefited from that. Nikola Tesla figured out alternating current, which is actually quite sophisticated. He figured it out in one day. And about the transformers and moving electricity in long distances, which was impossible with direct current at the time. And he figured that out in one day. So that's all it took was people like those people, or Victor Schauberger, who is attributed to designing the Foo Fighter engine in Nazi Germany and doing a whole host of other things. And people like that, just a few of those people, a few geniuses in a civilization with a wise leader, and they built this infrastructure to improve their lives. And that's what I think what happened a long time ago. Our distant ancestors, people like us, humans, built the Great Pyramid. And if you say aliens did it, you're also saying that that people weren't smart enough to do it. But I don't think that's the case. So I'm not one of them alien guys. I know people that study the Great Pyramid. You ask them how it was built, their answer is in 2 words, or 3. Aliens did it. and then they go on to something else. But
Yeah.
if you can't figure out how stones are moved from point A to point B, then your research is lacking.
Yeah, because there's been some great discoveries. I mean, like I'm really looking forward to as they discover more things like Göbekli Tepe.
Yes.
That is just an amazing, because this discovery is showing that, and that's one of the ones we talked earlier too about how Egyptologists, they seem to just refuse to update as information comes in. Here you have something that is predating by almost 6,000 years prior, and you're like, right here, we're showing some, this pretty thing. Well, no, it didn't. It wasn't until here. Well, what happened in this 6,000 years? They didn't just stop and then just suddenly decide to, okay, hey, let's do it again. So
you're correct. Yeah, Egyptology is certainly resistant to any type of change or improvement, if you will, and that's a problem. Egyptology is the biggest hindrance to understanding ancient Egypt, and how can I say this? It's going to be modified, or it will be in the ash bin of rejected ideas. But yeah, there's a lot of things, especially in the Middle East, a lot of unusual artifacts that are not easily explained by just an agrarian, simple civilization.
And it was kind of that same thing too. It kind of modern time, like the Egyptian artifacts that are found in the Amazon in South America. So obviously this wasn't just an agrarian society that liked to chisel rocks and stack them in these formations. We have this potentially worldwide seafaring population which would make sense if you know how to move a 70-ton block on a barge. Pretty sure you can build a boat that's going to sail across the ocean.
Oh, I think way back that there was I don't want to say international because it's not nations, but worldwide trade. A lot of things, zinc and copper. There's a lot more zinc and copper than the old world had access to. And up by the Great Lakes, there is some exceptional copper deposits. Yes. And they think that copper was mined and traded worldwide many years ago, before conventional archaeologists say it was. So it's a fascinating to consider that how smart ancient people are, and it's the honor and duty of modern day researchers to understand what our ancestors did in the real world and what really happened. So it's a puzzle. Ancient history is a puzzle with some pieces missing, but we're in a revolution of ideas, and I think that a more precise understanding of our ancient relatives is coming to light with Göbekli Tepe and all these other things,
And yeah, that's so. I mean, everybody. It's like if you want more information, from that Steve, like what we were talking about, you need to go to. You've got his site, thepump.org. I still have it on the videos here, but you got you can watch those videos which as he was talking, I was looking at them, and they go just point by point, like how the theory is behind this. Go here, get information from him. Like I said, get involved. Video series, the podcast he's been on, contact him. You can also go to Amazon.com and purchase these books and read them for yourself. And fantastic book, by the way, sir.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And I just hope people will find out about the research before they pass judgment and see what it's about. And the most revolutionary thing you can suggest to somebody is to read a book, and that's what I suggest to people. So people that don't have a vested interest in Egyptology really find the research compelling. Truck drivers, auto mechanics, people who work in shipyards, people that actually have to do something in the real world, people that understand what it takes to move heavy payloads. Those are the people that really find the research compelling, and as opposed to Egyptologists.
Yeah, yeah, it's, and one of those things like go through here. I kind of like that too. It's like if you go into something closed-minded, you miss out on options. Because I've always kind of said this thing: if you go into something closed-minded, it's because you probably haven't taken the time to actually study. It's more of an indoctrination than it is an actual education, because it's one of those, if you are unwilling to see evidence as it comes, like you've mentioned it a couple times, scientific method. If you truly follow this and you truly believe this, you have to insert new information as it comes, or else you're not doing what you're supposed to do. You're discounting information.
That's true. For just to say it again, Egyptology is sort of de-evolved into a mystery religion with their priests that repeat the same stories generation after generation. And but we're in the revolution of ideas, political ideas, social ideas, environmental ideas, and all of that. And all of those require new answers, not to new questions, not just the same old status quo. So that's it's a battle to get new ideas out there, and shows like this really make a difference. So
well, I appreciate that. I appreciate you coming on, because it was one I was really looking forward to this too. And I know Chris spent a lot of time last night, prepping, getting ready for this. And so, he was telling me, and I'm like, Dad, I know I'm really looking forward to having him on to discuss these things, because this is something that a lot of people have not heard this theory.
Yeah, that's true. It's new to most, but the word's getting out there. People are going to the YouTube channel and that type of thing, and you guys heard about it. So it takes a while to get a new idea out there. The guy named Alfred Wagner was a weatherman, if you will, and he came up with this idea of continental drift. But totally rejected by geologists. Again, it took about 40 years, and they came up with plate tectonics, which is virtually the same thing. Same thing, yeah. So yeah, it takes a while to get an idea out there, and the hardest thing you can ask anyone to do is to reject what you already think is true and replace it with a newer truth. Computer hard drives, it's easy to replace information on them, but the human mind, it's very difficult. So younger people find this research very compelling, but a lot of older, stodgy people don't. So I hope people are young at heart when they research the books and DVD documentaries.
Yeah, everybody, please go to his site, the pump.org, check out more information, go to Amazon, figure out. Right now it looks like both of those books are listed, for $8.99 for Kindle. So I mean, you can have it down tonight, and then when you're tucking yourself into bed, you can be reading this book.
True. I actually like Kindle over regular books, because when I'm in bed sleeping, a regular book will fall on my face, when I fall asleep. But a Kindle doesn't hurt.
I know. Oh my God, I didn't get a chance to mention that, because that was one of the things I talked about, where I'm kind of starting to like these things, like the paperbacks, is because I really love hardbacks. But man, I'm telling you, when you fall asleep and all of a sudden that spine from the hardback just pow, you're like,
yeah.
What? You're looking over your wife like, what did you do? What did I do? You're like, no, it was the book.
Also on the Kindle, the if you use a Kindle app, the pictures are in color, but in the soft color, they're grayscale. So,
there you go.
Just something.
Yeah.
Austin likes pictures, so make sure you get it in Kindle.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of pictures in the books, a lot of footnotes, and then both documentaries have a lot of computer generated animations that depict all of this stuff that we're talking about. It's very visual, and the entire process of how the water pump operated is very visual. It's like trying to describe how a V8 engine works. You know, a picture or a animation goes a long way, and that's what the documentaries are filled with, is quite a few animations.
Yeah, and that definitely helps, because there's a lot of people that, you know, you want the visual, you know, because it's a lot of cerebral. Like when you hit here, like we talked about the ram pump, you know, people are like, what the ram, you know, and then when you see the picture, like, oh yeah, you can kind of see the two side by side and see the gesture, and you're like, oh yeah, I do see the similarities between those two.
There are some, and some differences, but it's a good way for people to get a handle on it quickly, of that type of thing. Most people, when you talk about a pump, they think about an impeller and an electric motor, but there's a whole host of different types of pumps. If I may, there's a what they call the Humphrey pump in Australia, and they use fuel that they ignite, but it makes a vacuum. This Humphrey pump has no piston or cylinder or anything. It just has an enclosed structure that they create a vacuum with combustion, and then that draws water up into this airtight chamber. And we haven't talked about the Great Pyramid water pump's operation too much, but that pump has a similarity between, yes, the Humphrey pump. Yeah,
it's a tiny picture. I apologize. You know,
yeah.
For anybody that's hard, you know, has trouble seeing, I apologize for Austin getting me this small picture.
They can zoom
That's
in with
right.
their phone or whatever device
me.
they're on.
Yeah, there's there's a few automatic valves, and there's some timing mechanisms for the combustion and that, but it's a type of pump that's absolutely foreign to most people. And I'd like to go to see the Humphrey pump if I ever get a chance to, you know, travel restrictions the way they are. But what I'm saying is, if you look at that, it doesn't look like a water pump, just like the hydraulic ram doesn't look like a water pump. And we were going to do a tour to Egypt. I was going to lead a tour, but the coronavirus got us in travel restrictions. We were doing that in February. So if someone out there needs a tour leader in the future, they can contact me. The tour that I was going to lead was canceled, but the itinerary is still on our website. So keep that in mind.
Okay. That was one of the things, you know, go to thepump.org, you know, keep up on that. So, because one of these times we're going to get rid of these restrictions, and we're going to actually be able to get back to some semblance of normality, of being able to do what we would like to do, like these tours. And so, but everybody, Stephen, I can't thank you enough for coming on, man. I really appreciate it. You know, everybody, please go check out his book, go check out the site, send him some support, you know, thank him for coming on, and, you know, blessings to you, man. I said, hope everything goes there. Don't, you know, hopefully it doesn't rain too much more over there on the coast.
Oh yeah, I'm on the Oregon coast with lots of rain. So, but that's okay. And I sure, again, appreciate your kindness and open-mindedness, letting me discuss this unusual explanation of the Great Pyramid.
Oh, much, absolutely.
Thank you for breaking it down to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. So, well, hey, have a great night, sir. And we, like I said, we will definitely, as new information comes up, you know, please don't let us know as you find these things, because I'd love to get updates as we go. And then if something comes up, you know, bring you on at a later time too, get an update.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Have a great night. All right, everybody. This episode is brought to you by Nanny Cakes. Go to Nanny Cakes 407 on Facebook, or give her a call at 407-923-2898. And in Central Florida area, mention you heard it about here. She's going to save you 15% off your cake, which is a pretty impressive savings. ThreeBeardsPodcast.com is our site. Go there. Patreon.com/ThreeBeardsPodcast. If you liked that video we showed there in the beginning, that new one, that's brought on by support from not only Nanny Cakes and but also, you know, if you become Patreon, then it really helps. I mean, we've got to update it. We got to get a level, like, you know, put another level, but just, yeah, anything thrown our way is going to help us come up with these things. Austin got some free samples from J&J Beard Company for some beard oil. They're also rebroadcasting our show on Thursdays on their internet radio station, Patriot Radio. Go download the Zeno radio app so that way you can listen to it there afterwards. So everybody checks that, like, favorite, share, maybe, hit Austin up with a DM. Maybe you can get a personalized picture signed.
Why me?
Because it's fun.
Oh God.
Yes. So everybody, thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Steve Myers again. Everybody, please check him out. Really appreciate him coming on. April, thank you much for sharing it with it. That means the world to us. It seems like such a simple thing for you guys, but it does. It means the absolute world to us for you to share us off, because that means that we did something right, that you actually are willing to admit that you saw us. So everybody, thank you. Have a great night. We'll see you next week with some more great shows. Everybody, good night.